Unlike Intel, who have the habit of changing motherboard socket designs like most of us change our underwear, well, at least I hope most of you do, AMD has now joined the party. Let's do this. Oh, I can't believe I forgot to buy a bloody mouse. If only there was a Champion Series gaming mouse that I could pair with my brand new Corsair K70 RGB TKL keyboard.
Excuse me, there is the new Corsair Sabre RGB Pro Champion Series gaming mouse. Built for and tested by top esports professionals.
Where's that voice coming from?
With an 18,000 DPI optical sensor, capable of up to 8,000 Hz hyperpolling and ultra-responsive quick strike buttons. Pair it with that keyboard of yours and you too can hang out with the pros.
Really?
Well, not you, Andy.
Oh.
But everyone else can. Click the link in the description to find out more.
Typically, AMD has had a much longer lifespan for its own processors and, more importantly, motherboard sockets than the competition. Despite the fact that we're now onto our 4th generation of Ryzen processor releases, AMD is stuck with the AM4 platform since it originally launched back in 2017. And it's a move that's been, well, widely praised by their fans. Now, obviously, we all know there was a slight hiccup with the latest Ryzen 5000 series processors and their consequent backpedaling in regards to older motherboards and, well, the support for them. That aside, for the most part, consumers have been able to get a quick and easy upgrade by simply giving their older motherboard a BIOS update, removing the old processor, install the new one, and, well, away you go. What's not to love about that? Well, when we look at actually moving forward, and with AMD set to release their next generation of Ryzen processors, and we will get on to when later on in the video, it seems that while AM4 has kind of had a good run, AM5 is next on the agenda. And while it certainly brings a lot of good things with it, well, will Intel have an advantage? They just might. With the potential release of the Ryzen 5000 XT variants later this year, AMD has pretty much confirmed that this will mark the end of the AM4 socket, with future Ryzen, probably going to be called the 6000 series, transitioning over to their new AM5 platform when that's released. So yeah, AM4 is, I guess, on the way out. But what can we actually expect from AM5? Well, following the report, leaked information has provided us, probably, with some of the specifications we can expect to see from the AM5 socket design. And while perhaps a bit of a dry subject to some, it does give us our best gateway yet into what AMD's future Ryzen releases may actually represent. Now, given that this is rather a lot of details, we're going to attempt to kind of break this into easy, understandable, bite-sized chunks for you. Now, firstly, let's talk about the big one, and that is that it appears AM5 will transition to an LGA 1781 design. This means that, like Intel, the CPU pins will be located on the motherboard rather than on the processor itself. Now, this is quite interesting as to date, all Ryzen processors have had their pins located on the processor itself. Obviously, Threadripper and EPYC already adopt this, so it's not, I guess, new to AMD, but it is in terms of consumer grade products. Now, this could be potentially good or bad news depending on how you view it. Now, while the LGA system is, I guess, generally considered better, one of the key benefits of having the pins on the processor is, well, if you accidentally bend some of them, and yes, this does happen, you can at least attempt to get them back in line to rescue your CPU from potential disaster. Basically, straightening pins on a socket is, it's a lot harder to do. Not that I've ever had to do that. Honestly. Never. Moving on, with AM5 seemingly hosting more pin connectors than Intel's upcoming Alder Lake S, could this give AMD, a little bit of an advantage? Well, we'll get onto that shortly. Remember, we're trying to keep this concise and on point because if you're not too careful, this can all get very confusing very, very quickly. Another key factor of interest in this leak is that Ryzen 6000 will see the official transition of Team Red from DDR4 over to DDR5 memory. Faster speeds, lower power consumption, higher memory capacities, greater overclocking potential. I mean, what's not to love about that? At this point though, we find our first kind of potential fly in the ointment. Namely that if this leak is proven accurate, the AM5 socket will not, at least on launch, support PCI Express 5.0. Now, is this good or bad? Well, you have to consider when we can kind of expect this to actually be released. Intel's Alder Lake S processors are expected to land around kind of October this year, with AMD Ryzen 6000 and AM5 not expected to debut until late 2022. And this raises two key points. Firstly, and this is something of a moderate side note, other than the Ryzen 5000 XT variants, this leak would seemingly confirm that we're not going to see Ryzen 6000 this year. Secondly though, and this is the big one, with Alder Lake S expected to release in around October, Intel will pretty much have a solid year of potential market dominance under their belt, with AMD having literally nothing to offer in response socket-wise, other than kind of what we already have now. So while AM5 certainly looks decent, when pitting Alder Lake S directly against what we expect to be Ryzen 6000 series, Intel isn't just going to have a year's worth of DDR5 exclusivity, but they're also going to be able to offer consumers PCI Express 5.0 support for much longer than that. Admittedly, PCI Express kind of 5.0 isn't going to interest consumers as much as DDR5, but it's still going to represent an important tech transition over the coming years, and in that regard, it's definitely an advantage to Intel. Now, we've often said over the last year that Alder Lake S would represent Intel's kind of first true response to Ryzen. Yes, they've kind of flapped about a bit at Intel over the last 4 years with Comet Lake S and such, but this is going to be a full-on punch to Team Red's gut, and based on this leak, it seems that in terms of market exclusivity for premium tech, well, AMD might actually fill this one, particularly if they have, well, nothing to offer consumers for the next 12 to 16 months other than the XT variant Ryzen 5000 upgrades, which generally, it just means slightly faster clock speeds and nothing else really. Speaking of upgrades though, did you use a Swiss Army knife that hopefully had a Phillips head screwdriver to build your last PC? Well, this is where the eTechnics Toolkit comes in, which gives you everything you need to make that experience as painless as possible. Available over on store.etechnics.com or by clicking the link in the description below. So there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know exactly what to do, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.